somebody, I will tend to try to harvest the insights I can get from the other person, combine them with what I think is true, and then combine that in some useful way into a more complex understanding of the situation. You're absolutely right. That's the way I'm wired. It makes it easy for me. It actually makes it very easy for me to do research as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've always said that the motivation for my first book, which was on change, is because I hated change. I didn't like change. And so I was wondering if you're going to say I'm primarily a avoider.
Well, what I would say is I came from a family that was primarily accommodators. And like my father's way of, if there was one piece of food left on the plate and he wanted it, his approach to claiming that was to say, does anybody else want this? And then to follow that up with, Ken, I'm sure you want this, and so on. Past the point of any utility, if I would say, Dad, take it. And so I had to overcome a little bit to be as collaborative and flexible as I am.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I can hang with friends years ago. I'm like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And sometimes you just need that person, that competing friend, right? It's just, hey, we're going to see a movie or whatever. So I got to tell you, I could talk to you for hours on the whole conflict side in TKI, but I'm also really excited to be able to tell our listeners about your work on intrinsic motivation. Like when I think of extrinsic, I think of things like salary, benefits, corner offices, and there's a slide I share in some of our leadership workshops that talks about the difference between what employees say they want and what managers think the employees want. And as it turns out, the intrinsic factors, such as, in this particular study, the full appreciation for work done and feeling in on things, they almost always beat out the extrinsic ones. So I'm just wondering, have you found the same result, and what's changed over the years to make intrinsic motivation so important to workers?
Well, I found actually a different study than the one you mentioned, which has come out recently. And when you talk to people about their own motivation, they tune into the importance of intrinsic rewards. But if you ask those same people about other people and what motivates them, then they tend to explain their behavior in terms of extrinsic rewards and personal gain. So there's really an interesting bias there. And one of the things that comes out from the leadership training we do around the work engagement profile is people learning that, in fact, other people are wired the same way that they are, that intrinsic rewards are just as important to other people as they are to them, as special insight for managers.
Yeah. Often I'll hear people, especially in our current economic environment, they'll be saying things like, I need more staff. I can't deliver unless I get more FTEs or I get more people. More people is sometimes the answer, but is it fair to say from your perspective, Ken, that there's productivity that's currently being left on the table with people who are so disengaged or unwilling to go the mile, let alone the extra mile, so to speak?
Absolutely. There are a couple of things going on. We've looked at actual research data that tracks what people say about their jobs over the last 30 years. And there's just been a sea change in the nature of work. And it comes from a lot of different events in the intervening years. A lot of really bureaucratic, repetitive, and low-skilled jobs have been outsourced or automated, so that the kinds of skills that we have left in this country tend to be higher-end skills now that require a great deal of judgment and so on. At the same time, younger people especially feel that intrinsic rewards are more important and so on. And there's been a lot of changes, and the upshot of it all is that intrinsic rewards have become much more important than they used to be. They're much more important than extrinsic rewards now. And so when you're talking about people leaving productivity on the table, then that is now the logical place to look is, what's going on in terms of the rewards that they're getting from this. One way of talking about how the work has changed is that it involves a lot more self-management now by people. People are often, for example, working in different locations from their bosses. The work is less bureaucratic, there are fewer rules. People have to make more decisions and use more of their skills. The good side of that is that it makes the job potentially more intrinsically motivated, which is a sort of major factor in providing the energy that keeps people engaged and self-managing. That potential is there, but there are a lot of things that can keep that from happening, as there are a lot of people who are turned off, de-energized, and disengaged in those jobs. So what we've done with the work engagement profile is try to identify those intrinsic rewards that keep people engaged and self-managing on the job. So we look at the sense of meaningfulness, whether or not people think that the purpose they're pursuing in their job is a worthwhile and worthy one, their sense of choice, whether they're free to make decisions about how to best accomplish the purpose, as opposed to being boxed in by rules and procedures or maybe the boss's prejudices and so on, which seem to them not to be the right way of doing things, so they see they're wasting some energy. Sense of competence, which means basically being able to perform the activities that are inherent in your job in a way that's satisfying, so you feel you're doing a quality job and so on. And then finally, sense of progress, that you are in fact, all the work you're doing is in fact making progress towards accomplishing that meaningful purpose. So what we've learned is all four of those rewards, sense of meaningfulness, sense of choice, sense of confidence, sense of progress, have to be present to sustain worker engagement in this new work that we have today. And we use the work engagement profile as a way of getting a reading on the extent to which those things are high or relatively low, so that people are leaving a great deal of their energy and work on the table.
I gotta tell you, I'm really excited to use that profile with my clients. It just seems like it'd be very easy to use. Is there anything else about the work engagement profile that would be helpful for us to know, like how you see it helping organizations?
Sure. Let me talk a little bit more about what's in it, too, and then talk about how people use it. Basically, you get a reading of meaningfulness, sense of choice, sense of competence, and sense of progress. You can do that for individuals. You can do that for a team, if you're interested in a project team, for example.
That's a good idea.
Or you can do that for the whole organization if you're trying to do an OD intervention and build a culture of engagement, for example. So it provides that kind of information. It also allows people then to graph their scores in relationship to the scores of other people who've taken the instrument, so they can tell if they're sort of in the middle on a sense of meaningfulness, for example, or if they're high or low. We also provide people with rich descriptions of the experience of scoring high or low on each of those intrinsic rewards. And we find that very valuable. People are able to tune into the experience of being high or low on that reward. I'll give you an example here. So this one is from meaningfulness. So if your score is in the high range, you have the sense that you're devoting your time to something of real value, that what you're doing could make a significant positive difference. You feel a strong sense of purpose and direction, that this is what you should be doing right now. You want to spend your productive hours on this important work and may resent spending time on any less meaningful matters that intrude. You bring your best attention, thinking, and creativity to the work and are committed to doing all you can to move the work along. You can hear the energy in that description. In contrast, here's a description of somebody who would be scoring in the low range. You have the sense that you are spending most of your time on relatively unimportant or even pointless matters, that what you're doing won't make much of a difference or a contribution. At times it feels as though you are simply waiting for something better or more interesting to come along and putting in your time until it does. Without a strong sense of purpose, you often have to force yourself to concentrate on the work and may sometimes feel you are just going through the motions. Yeah. So you can hear the low energy in that one. Right?
Oh, yeah, that is for sure. And I can envision the choice side, too, of people feeling like, I just want to be able to have a say. I want to have some choices involved here.
That's right. They feel constrained by rules that seem inflexible, that don't make sense. So they feel they're doing things in an incorrect way, while there's a better way that they could come up with themselves.
It seems like as an individual taking this, it would be insightful because it would give me kind of a sense, an objective way of, how am I feeling about things. But I'm thinking more so from the leader perspective. getting a pulse of what my staff is thinking. That could be very insightful for, am I giving them enough choice? Am I showing how what they do has meaning in the overall scheme of things?
Exactly. There are several ways you can use this thing. Some people are using it in executive coaching and career counseling. What is your sense of meaningfulness, choice, competence, and progress, and so on? And what can you do about that? And they'll direct them to those kinds of issues and to make changes and so on. It's also used, as you say, in teams to find out what's the current state of motivation. It's used in leadership training so that leaders fill this out for themselves. They start with their own intrinsic motivation, and then the attention turns to, well, how do you think your people would be answering these kinds of questions? Because